Okay, welcome back. What we are going to do now is we are going to add a component or two components that will make a solid DC power supply out of this bridge rectifier. This is the same circuit that we ended with in the last video because we're going to use this exact thing. So I'm going to move a couple things out of the way. Now what our goal is to take, if you remember when we measured right here, we had that little ripple. Well, that's at 10.5 volts or whatever, and that's great. But what if somebody comes and they say, well, we only need 3.3 volts or 5 volts or 7 volts or 9 volts? We can do that with this power supply. We can make various power supplies, DC sources out of this power supply. So I'm going to show you an example of that. If I go to diodes and I grab a Zener diode. We covered Zener diodes. Let's put this one right here. I'm going to connect it once again in series. Now if you remember, a Zener diode will clamp a voltage at whatever the Zener is rated at. This one is 5 volts. Now, one thing we have to be careful of here, we have to add another component. Remember, we have all this stuff going on over here. We had that full wave, and then we put this capacitor in here, and we made a little bit of a ripple at about 10.4 volts. We don't want to really clamp this entire thing. We just want to clamp what's coming into this section. So I'm going to take a resistor, and I'm going to isolate it. And we've done this before, if you remember, with different components when we've needed to isolate them from other things. So at this point, we still have, we'll measure it, and we still have our little ripple source here. But now, over on this side, we'll measure something a little bit different. Now, what we should see is a 5 volt supply, okay, on this side, which is what we're going to measure. But over here, we should still see that ripple. So we're using this ripple that we've created excuse me, to create a 5 volt solid DC supply. So let's split the screen and let's run it. So there's our ripple. We saw that before. That's exactly the same as it was in the last video. But now at this point right here, we have a solid 5 volt signal, which is exactly what maybe we need. Maybe we have a supplier, maybe we have a customer that says, well, that's great, I like the power supply, but we only need 5 volts. Now, the nice thing about this is, well, okay, what if I don't want 5? Come on. I only want 3.3. Perfect. So then all we do is we go over to our tool or components drawers and we grab a 3.3 volt Zener out. And we pop that in and we get 3.3 volts. Now, the nice thing about this circuit, this is a pretty robust circuit. I've used this in multiple different designs, but you can actually create different sources from the same one. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to grab, a Zener, another Zener. I'm going to put it here. Now, I'm not lying. I didn't do a test run on this, so I'm going to assume it's going to work with this. I know the circuit works, but you're just going to have to trust me. All right, so I'm going to isolate this. Now, I want to measure it, because still at this point right here, we should have 5 volts. But now, what about this one over here? Whoops. Now, one thing I got to be careful of, this wouldn't work at this moment. I'm taking this ripple, which is about 10.4. I'm knocking it down to 3.3. That 3.3 is going to flow into here, but this is 5. So really, this side should be 5. And let's make this side 3.3. Okay, let's do a split. And let's see where we're at. And there you go. So what does this mean? Well, that means you can tie anything into this point right here and get 5 volts, and tie anything into this point right here and get 3.3 volts. Actually, it's 2 point something. That's interesting. 2.4. I'm guessing that's because of this resistor, which I didn't really go through and calculate. So, but regardless, I've designed these with 3 different Zeners before and gotten 3 different DC supplies. You'll notice too that these have virtually no ripple at all. Now, if we really magnified them, you'd see a little tiny ripple, but it is a solid DC source that we can use to turn on all kinds of different things. Okay, so that's one of the ways that we can use our power supply using Zeners to create a DC supply. Now we're going to do it with an adjustable source. That's what we'll do next.